Today I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of renting your property to Section 8. And if you're watching this video because you got a Section 8 applicant and you're thinking of renting to them, then you're in luck, because in this video I'm going to talk about everything from the process to my experience personally dealing with Section 8 tenants. So sit back and enjoy this video, because I hope that this video helps you decide if you really want to rent to a Section 8 tenant and if it's the best choice for you. I'm going to start this video with a con. The biggest con to Section 8 investing or renting to a Section 8 tenant, the Section 8 inspection. This is the reason that a lot of people decide not to rent to Section 8. When you have a property and you rent to Section 8, before the tenant moves in, they're going to have an inspector come out, look at all the details of your property. They're going to make sure that you have a window or a fan in the bathrooms. They're going to check a lot of things that have to do with safety. Now, if you have an older property, then you're most likely going to fail a lot of things. Also, even if you have a brand new property, if one of your outlets is not grounded, then you're going to fail the inspection. And then they're going to have to come again and re-inspect your property. Could take a week or two. And if you really want to rent a place, then this is not the best option, because just doing the inspection, it could take weeks before you get the inspection to pass. The biggest issue I see with these inspections is the fact that when the Section 8 inspector goes to a property and they have a list of 20 things that need to be fixed, they don't usually talk and explain to the owner that it's not that big of a deal. So when they send this list of 20 things to the landlord and he sees 20 things that need to be fixed, he automatically rejects Section 8. And he's not going to accept Section 8 for as long as he's a landlord. Now, this is a big issue because 50% of Section 8 vouchers go unused. And a big part is this Section 8 inspections. And I can tell you from experience, in my property that I rented to Section 8, I failed about 25 items. It wasn't a big deal for me. I just got them fixed. But my initial reaction was just to rent to another tenant. Now, that's not what I did. I fixed the items and I got the inspector to come out again and we passed inspection. And currently there, a Section 8 tenant resides. Now, I'm also a realtor. I was renting an apartment in Derby, Connecticut. The apartment was recently renovated. It was in very good shape and we had the Section 8 inspector come out. Now, the landlord thought that the Section 8 was gonna pass the apartment no issue. Well, to his surprise, he got a list of things that needed to be fixed. I tried to convince the landlord to just get somebody to go out there and fix that, but he decided to rent to another tenant. Now, in this situation, the landlord was willing to rent to Section 8, but because there's a Section 8 inspection, they decided to go with a private tenant. This is a big hit for Section 8 because a lot of people, like I mentioned, have their vouchers go unused. And these are usually families in need of housing, in need of the assistance. So the Section 8 inspection is one of the biggest drawbacks to Section 8. Now let's talk about a pro of Section 8. And this is probably the reason that most people decide to go with Section 8. And that is guaranteed income. But a lot of people think that Section 8 pays 100% of the rent, when that is not the case. Section 8 pays most of the rent, but depending on the tenant and if they work or if they have a disability, they might be responsible usually from 10 to 30% of the rent. So Section 8 will usually pay 70% of the rent, and depending on the tenant, they might pay a little bit more or a little bit less. So it all depends on the tenant. Now, a lot of people are surprised when they realize that not the full amount is covered by Section 8. But I don't want you to be in that position. I'm letting you know right now. If you're renting to a Section 8, you can ask them yourself, how much of the rent or of the voucher does Section 8 cover, and how much do you got to put from your money? And then they're going to tell you the percentage that Section 8 actually pays and the percentage that they pay. Let me just tell you something. And I heard this from a Section 8 office, but I don't know if it's true because I've never been in this situation. But if you're evicting a Section 8 tenant, the portion that Section 8 pays you is still going to be paid to you during the eviction. This could be a great benefit for a lot of people because usually during an eviction of a private tenant, you're not receiving any money. With Section 8, you'll still be receiving part of the money for the rent, which is a big help, especially during evictions, because you're already paying for an attorney that costs you probably around 15 to 2 grand. Another big drawback to Section 8, and it's not a drawback to me because I like to keep everything clean, but a big drawback to Section 8 is that you have to report the rental income from that property. A lot of people own properties and they rent them out and they never report the rental income. This is because they don't want to pay taxes. However, when you rent to Section 8, you gotta report the income. they're actually going to make you fill out a W-9 before the tenant moves in. So if you're going to rent to Section 8, just know that. And this is a drawback to a lot of people, not to me like I mentioned. But be ready to pay taxes or at least report the income of the Section 8 rent. If you're like me and you're constantly fixing up the property and you're depreciating the property, then you'll find ways to minimize the amount of taxes you're going to pay on that rental income. But a lot of people don't do that, or they just don't have the knowledge. So what they decide to do is just not rent to Section 8 and go with a private tenant, because that way they don't have to pay taxes on that rental income. A pro to renting to Section 8 is the fact that now you have access to a larger tenant pool. If you're open to renting to Section 8, now you just select all the Section 8 people that live in that area to be potential tenants. So renting to Section 8 could actually make your time renting a place a lot easier, because there's going to be a lot more people that are going to be able to look at the property. Also, it's illegal to not want to rent to Section 8. So be careful with that, because I see things on Facebook where it says no Section 8. If someone decided to sue you, they can go after you. And they can go after you or your property, depending on if you have the property under a LLC. And if it's a personal Facebook account, then they could probably go after you personally. So be very careful against discriminating against Section 8. Another big con with Section 8, and it doesn't have to do with Section 8 itself, the stigma the Section 8 has. A lot of people automatically assume that Section 8 tenants are horrible, when that's not true. There is good people in Section 8 and there's bad people in Section 8. There's good people that are private tenants and there's bad people that are private tenants. My worst tenants have been private tenants. Section 8 or not, that has nothing to do with the quality of tenants. Section 8 usually has families in need of some assistance, and that's who you should go for. Now, I'm not saying that all Section 8 tenants are angels. I'm just saying that you can find good or bad tenants on Section 8 or not on Section 8. So you shouldn't assume or make decisions based on the stigmas that Section 8 has. One of the biggest pros of renting to Section 8, in my opinion, is that Section 8 tenants usually stay in properties for much longer. If you're new to being a landlord, then you don't know how important this is. But when a tenant moves out, you usually got to reinvest $1,000, $5,000, $10,000 back into the property to make it rentable again. So if a tenant stays in your property for longer, that means that you are always making more money. If a tenant moves out and it takes you 2 months to rent it out, you lost 2 months of rent. Now, if they had stayed for that time, then you wouldn't have lost on those 2 months of rent. When you re-rent, you usually hire a realtor, unless you do it yourself. But let's say you hire a realtor, they're going to charge you 1 month's rent to rent the place out. So that's another cost. It has been proven that Section 8 tenants stay in properties for longer. So this is good for you as a landlord. Now let me get into the reasons that Section 8 tenants stay longer in properties. And that is because they're discriminated against. Even though it's illegal to discriminate against Section 8, they are discriminated against, and the people in Section 8 know that. They know that a lot of people are not going to accept Section 8. And how do I know that? Because when I rent a place, the first thing that Section 8 tenants tell me is, do you guys rent to Section 8? This is because they don't want to waste their time with someone that is just going to give them the runaround and was never going to rent to them. That's number one to why Section 8 tenants stay longer. Section 8 tenants know that if they move, they gotta find a new home, then they gotta get the Section 8 to do the inspection. For the same reason that it's hard on the landlord to rent to Section 8, the inspections, the fixes, is also the reason that Section 8 tenants are gonna stay there longer, because they know just how inconvenient it is for them to move. Because now they gotta do this whole process all over again. This is good and bad. Bad, when you're renting, you gotta pass the Section 8 inspection and a lot of these things. But good, because the Section 8 tenant is gonna stay there for longer, which means you don't gotta worry about fixing the property again or re-renting the property again. That, in my opinion, is one of the biggest plus to Section 8. The fact that they're gonna stay in your property for longer. Now I'm going to talk about my personal experience with Section 8. Last year I rented my property to a Section 8 tenant, and so far my experience has been good. Initially the house had a few sewer issues, but we got those resolved, and the Section 8 tenant was very understanding. This already goes against the stigma of Section 8 tenants. This tenant, Section 8, very understanding, very easy to deal with, and when something breaks, she lets me know. This is good for me, and you should want that the tenant tells you when something breaks, because a lot of tenants will not tell you when something breaks, and then as time passes, it becomes more and more unfixable. Now, when a tenant tells you, hey, this broke, can you fix it? And you go and fix it, you stop the issue right there. You don't want to have issues in your property that continue to get worse and worse and worse. This is usually how you lose properties. Another thing I want to talk about is rent increase. increases. If you're new to being a landlord, then you don't know that when you rent to Section 8, you don't actually go and ask the tenant for a rent increase. What you do, you go to the Section 8 office and you ask for a rent increase. They're gonna make you fill out a form, and then they'll have an inspector come out again. They'll have someone that focuses on seeing what the market rent should be. And if your unit is under that, then they'll probably give you a rent increase. So think about how easy that is. Instead of asking the tenant to pay you more rent, you go to the office and they themselves will figure all that out for you. The way you gotta think about it with Section 8 is that you're in a partnership. And when you're in a partnership, then you guys work together. They're gonna ask you to fix things, and you can also ask them for rent increases. You can ask them for help with managing the tenants and certain things. Overall, I think renting to Section 8 is a very good idea, but know exactly what you're getting into. You're gonna have a Section 8 inspection. You're gonna fail the inspection most likely. 99% of people fail the inspection, at least one or two things. But once you pass the inspection and once you're done with the initial process, then you should be good. And that tenant is probably gonna stay in your property for longer, which is a plus for you because that means that you'll have more money in your pocket. And that's the truth of renting to Section 8. It can be bad, it could be good, it could be ugly. Always screen the tenant, even if it's a Section 8 tenant, just make sure that they are good people and you should be good. I'm gonna give you one tip before I leave, and that is if you're renting an apartment and the people come in demanding this, demanding that, then be careful with those people because they usually do that to hide the fact that they're going through an eviction or to make you focus on different things. The best tenants, in my experience, are people that come in and they're very respectful. If someone comes in demanding a lot of things, that doesn't mean that they're bad tenants automatically, but be careful because that is one of the signs of the worst tenants that you can have. The worst tenants that I had to evict were very demanding people. And it's funny how that correlates. The worst people demand the most and the best people don't demand as much. Be careful, rent to a Section 8 tenant, and hopefully your rental property performs very well. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.